As we walk along Corso Garibaldi in Milano, we run into the church of San Simpliciano. Inside the church, we can admire a true masterpiece.
It is the Coronation of the Virgin, painted around 1508 by Ambrogio da Fossano, also known as the Bergognone. Ambrogio was born in 1453 in Fossano, near Cuneo. In the past, the inhabitants of Piedmont, who used to carry wine to Milan in large wicker baskets, were often assimilated to the inhabitants of Burgundy by the Milanese. This was the origin of the nickname of this artist. When he was young, his style had been influenced by a master like Donato de Bardi and by Flemish painters with whom he had come into contact during his stays in Liguria. Unconcerned by the innovations of masters like Leonardo and Raphael, Bergognone adhered to the old Lombard school. He painted his figures in different dimensions, according to their place in the hierarchy, like in medieval paintings. In the center of this fresco, the divine images form a triangle. At the summit of it is the face of God, with his flowing beard of pure white color. The figures of Jesus and of the Virgin emerge from the drapery of their white cloaks. Jesus is crowned, and his curled hair falls on his shoulders. His face is emaciated, and with his hands he places a crown upon Mary. She is, like him, pale as ivory, as if shining with inner light. The angels, as if suspended in a colored fluid, are arranged to form a large almond, aligned on concentric bands in groups of 3. The figures of the angels that belong to the outer bands appear in full and in different postures, depicted as musicians or as singers or in adoration. The angel of the second order of triads are closer together, as they form a triple curved column on both sides. Then, even closer to the divine figures and behind them, heads of cherubs and seraphim are even more closely arranged in groups of 3 in a whirlwind of ever warmer colors. The figures and their halos are embellished with gilding. The musician angels on the outer side of the composition create a youthful animation around the majestic stillness of the central group. In the foreground, just above the lower edge of the cupola, 20 figures of saints, prophets, martyrs, and virgins are lined up. On the left the men, and on the right the women, in accordance with the ancient liturgical separation. While the divine figures are painted with hieratic majesty, these figures are represented in a realistic way, with somatic features and expressions that characterize each one of them in vivid portraits. On the left of this line of figures, close to St. John the Baptist, who wears the fleece typical of hermits, we can see Dante Alighieri holding a long scroll. Between the poet and the figure of a young deacon in his ritual garb is an old man with a white beard, probably a self-portrait of the painter. The Basilica of San Simpliciano, or Basilica Virginum, has ancient origins, and it is the best preserved among early Christian buildings in Milan. According to the tradition, it is one of the 4 basilica founded by Ambrose in the 4th century outside the city walls, in the 4 cardinal points together with that of Sant'Ambrogio, Basilica Martyrum, San Nazzaro, Basilica Apostolorum, and San Dionigi, Basilica Sanctorum. The Paleo-Christian building had a single nave. It was 56 meters long, 21 meters wide, and 19 meters high. The original floor was about 1 meter and 80 centimeters lower than the current one. The church had a large transept and a large apse. On the outer walls of the building, a double row of arcades set on pilasters had both an aesthetic and a structural function, as they provided support to the broad trusses of the roof. The upper arcades, along the entire perimeter, there were large windows, not always perfectly aligned with the brick arcades. On both extremities of the transept, a few windows open also in the lower order of the arcades. A portico surrounded the front and the sides of the church. To the north of the apse is a sacellum with a barrel-vaulted ceiling, dating from the beginning of the 5th century. It was probably a funerary chapel, also dedicated to the preservation of relics. In the 7th century, the single nave was divided by creating side aisles, obtained by constructing quadrangular pillars that helped to bear the weight of the wide roof. Some large roof tiles bear the seal of the Lombard king Agilulf and of his son Adalwald. Between the 11th century and the middle of the 12th, in the age of Romanesque architecture, the basilica underwent drastic renovation works. The pillars were reduced in number, but enlarged in size. Internal buttresses were created, and the windows were walled up in order to reinforce the structure and to better support the new vaulted ceiling and its ribs. Also, the transept was divided into aisles, and its windows were made smaller. The last step of the renovation was the creation of the octagonal lantern, surrounded on the outside by a slender loggia. Also, the facade was restructured with a beautiful portal and richly sculpted capitals. The apse was rebuilt in a smaller size, maybe because the right aisle of the church had collapsed, so that the width of the basilica had been reduced and the bell tower had become separated from the church. In 1552, the bell tower was lowered by about 25 meters by disposition of Ferrante Gonzaga, in order to prevent anyone from looking into the castle. The history of the basilica is linked to that of the Battle of Legnano, in which the Lombard League prevailed upon Barbarossa with the help, according to the legend, of the saint martyrs of the known valley, Martino, Sisinio, and Alessandro. Their relics are still venerated in the church. After the battle, San Simpliciano became the Basilica of the Carroccio, the four-wheeled war altar of the Milanese in the battle. In the 15th century, the side chapels were added and the porticos were demolished. In his last will, the abbot Gian Alimento Negri provided that a fresco of the Coronation of the Virgin was painted in the apse after his death, which occurred in 1499. In the 16th century, the Benedictine monks of Cassano took over from the Cluniacs. To this period dates the creation of the cloister of the chapter and of that of the 2 columns, as well as that of the beautiful wooden choir designed by Giuseppe Meda. At the beginning of the 18th century, the chapel of the Rosary was created, breaking through the wall of the left transept. The chapel is a room divided with cross vaults into 2 spans of different depths. In 1841, the church was severely altered by a restoration of architect Aloisetti. He painted vaults and walls in bands of 4 marble of 2 colors. He chipped away the decorations of the ancient Romanesque capitals to reconstruct them with stucco, and eliminated 4 pillars in the transept. The altar that we can see today was installed, designed by architect Parecci. Still today, it hides from the view the fresco of the Bergognone. In 1870, architect Macciachini restored the facade, but did not hesitate to insert 2 new minor doors and 2 double-arch windows on the marks of more ancient ones. The post-war restorations have returned the basilica to its former glory, although some details have been unfortunately lost.
Stillness.